the formidable Panther, and the American dilemma. The dawn of the Normandy campaign in June 1944 presented the United States Army with a brutal and unanticipated tactical crisis. The M4 Sherman tank, the workhorse of American armored divisions, was encountering a German adversary it was ill-equipped to defeat in a direct confrontation, the Panzerkampfwagen-fired Panther. This German medium tank was a masterpiece of martial engineering, conceived in response to the shocking effectiveness of the Soviet T-34. It combined a long-barreled, high-velocity 75mm KWK-42 gun with revolutionary armor design. Its most defining feature was the glacis plate, an 80mm slab of hardened steel sloped at a 55-degree angle, creating a phenomenal effective thickness of approximately 140mm. This geometry meant that most American tank shells would not bite into the armor, but would instead deflect harmlessly away, a phenomenon known as ricochet. American pre-invasion intelligence had catastrophically miscalculated both the quantity and the qualitative leap of German armor. Planners had anticipated encountering Panthers in small numbers, perhaps as rare command vehicles. The reality was a staggering shock. By D-Day, the Panther constituted a formidable 38% of German tank strength in France. They were not curiosities. They were the new backbone of the Panzer divisions. While many were crude by hastily trained replacements, the tank itself was a predator. Its high-velocity gun could confidently engage and destroy a Sherman from distances exceeding 2,000 meters, a range at which the American tank was effectively blind and impotent. The standard 75mm M3 gun on the majority of Shermans could not penetrate the Panther's frontal armor at any practical combat range. This created a devastating asymmetry. American tank crews had to close to suicidal distances for a chance at a flank shot, all the while being perfectly vulnerable to a single, lethal round from a Panther they could not yet effectively engage. The initial American response to this threat was the deployment of the 76mm M1 gun, a more powerful weapon that began appearing in a new variant of the Sherman, the M4A1 76W, which started arriving in British ports in April 1944. However, its deployment was hamstrung by a combination of bureaucratic inertia, logistical concerns, and a fundamental misreading of the battlefield. Commanders, including General Dwight D. Eisenhower, had been assured by the Ordnance Department that the 76mm gun would be the wonder gun capable of handling any German armor. Yet, when the first of these improved Shermans became available, many senior commanders refused to deploy them for the D-Day landings. The reasons were multifaceted. Crews were untrained on the new system, logistical chains were already complex, without introducing a new ammunition type, and a pervasive belief that the 75mm gun, adequate for infantry support and against older Panzer IVs, would suffice. This decision would have dire consequences for the tank crews fighting in the nightmarish confines of the Norman bocage. When the 76mm Shermans were finally rushed to the front in late July during Operation Cobra, their performance was sobering. While an improvement over the 75mm, the standard M62 armor-piercing capped APC round fired by the 76mm gun could only penetrate about 109mm of armor at 1,000 meters. This was effective against Panzer IVs and assault guns, but against the Panther's sloped glacis, it was still largely useless. The Panther's thick, curved gun mantlet offered another potential target, but it could only be penetrated at point-blank ranges of under 100 meters, a tactical scenario tantamount to a duel where the Panther, with its superior first-shot kill probability, would almost always emerge victorious. The problem, it became agonizingly clear, was not primarily the gun, but the projectile it was firing. The solution to this existential threat would not be found on the drawing boards of a new tank, but in the metallurgical laboratories and forging shops of the American industrial base, where a revolutionary type of ammunition was already in development. The genesis of HVAP, metallurgy as a tactical solution. The American response to the Panther crisis was a testament to the nation's industrial and scientific ingenuity. While tank crews in Normandy were learning the harsh realities of armored combat through bitter experience, American ballistic engineers were already perfecting a technological countermeasure that would fundamentally alter the dynamics of tank-on-tank engagements. The high-velocity armor-piercing (HVAP) round, standardized as the M93. The principle behind HVAP, also known as an armor-piercing composite rigid (APCR) or tungsten-core round, was a radical departure from conventional solid-shot armor-piercing ammunition. A traditional AP shell was a single piece of hardened steel. Its weight and velocity determined its penetrating power. The HVAP round turned this concept on its head. It was a composite projectile, consisting of a core made of tungsten carbide, one of the hardest and densest materials available, encased within a lightweight body, typically made of aluminum. This entire assembly was then fitted with a ballistic windshield to streamline its flight. This design was a masterpiece of physics and engineering. The lightweight body allowed the round to be accelerated to a much higher muzzle velocity, 136 ms for the 76mm HVAP, compared to 792 ms for the standard M62 round. This immense velocity concentrated the kinetic energy into the small, ultra-dense tungsten core, which acted like a hypodermic needle, transferring all its force into a tiny area on the enemy armor plate, dramatically increasing its chance of punching through. The performance data was startling. Official War Department tests concluded that the 76mm M93 HVAP round could penetrate up to 160 mm of vertical armor at 1,000 yards, approximately 914 meters. This transformed the tactical calculus. Suddenly, the Panthers gun mantlet, which had previously been a near impenetrable shield at all but point-blank range, became a viable target at standard combat distances. A Sherman crew, if they could achieve a hit on the mantlet, could now reliably expect a penetration at ranges up to 1,000 meters, turning a previously suicidal engagement into a fair fight. The psychological ramifications of this were as important as the physical ones. It gave American tankers a tool and a reason to stand their ground. However, developing the ammunition was only half the battle. Producing it in meaningful quantities presented a monumental strategic challenge. The miracle material, tungsten carbide, was a strategic resource of critical importance and limited availability. The primary global source was China, which supplied over a third of the world's tungsten before the war. This tungsten was not just for tank shells. It was vital for the machine tools that manufactured every other piece of military hardware, for hardening armor plate, and for other armor-piercing projectiles. Every 76mm HVAP round contained nearly 0.9 kilon of tungsten carbide, meaning a single Sherman carrying 6 rounds was transporting over 5 kilos of this precious material. American domestic production from mines in Colorado and Nevada supplemented Chinese imports, but the total supply was finite and fiercely contested. Germany's own tungsten situation was far more desperate, reliant on dwindling imports from neutral nations and prioritizing what little they had for machine tools essential for aircraft production, leaving their tank crews with only standard ammunition. This disparity in industrial resource allocation would become a decisive, if often overlooked, factor in the war of attrition. Bureaucratic hesitation and the rush to the front. The story of the 76mm Sherman and its HVAP ammunition is as much a tale of bureaucratic friction as it is of technological innovation. The first M4A1 76 tanks had been produced in January 1944 and were in Britain by April, well before the D-Day landings. Their non-deployment for the invasion remains one of the great what-ifs of the European campaign. The institutional resistance was rooted in a conservative military mindset that failed to grasp the qualitative shift in German tank design. The Sherman, in the eyes of many senior commanders, was not meant to duel with other tanks. That was the role of the dedicated tank destroyer branch. The Sherman's primary role was infantry support and exploitation, using its reliability and numbers to break through enemy lines. Engaging heavy enemy armor was considered a defensive, counter-punching action, not the Sherman's job. The brutal reality of the Normandy bocage shattered this doctrine. In the close quarters, hedgerow-dominated terrain, Shermans constantly stumbled upon well-camouflaged Panthers and the even more fearsome Tigers. The result was a slaughter. Reports from the front flooded back to Supreme Headquarters, describing the impotence of American tank guns. The frustration reached the highest levels. A famous and likely apocryphal yet illustrative quote attributed to General Eisenhower upon being briefed on the problem captured the command-level fury. "You mean our 76 won't knock these Panthers out? Why, I thought it was the wonder gun of the war." The sentiment was real. A formal board of inquiry convened on July 12, 1944, officially confirmed what every tank crew already knew. American tanks could not frontally defeat the Panther. This official recognition triggered a frantic scramble. General Omar Bradley immediately ordered all available 76mm Shermans, shipped from British depots, to the front lines. They made their combat debut in significant numbers during Operation Cobra on July 25, 1944. The initial results, however, were still disappointing. The standard 76mm ammunition was not the guaranteed Panther killer that had been hoped for. While it could now achieve kills against the mantlet at closer ranges and was more effective against the Panther's thinner side armor, it did not nullify the German tank's overwhelming advantage. Sherman crews still had to employ risky flanking maneuvers or hope for a lucky hit. It was at this critical juncture, as American armored divisions finally broke out of the Normandy hedgerows into the more open country of Lorraine, that the first trickle of M93 HVAP rounds began to reach frontline units. They arrived not as a standard issue, but as a rare and precious commodity, often allocated at just 5 or 6 rounds per tank, to be used only in moments of direst need. The Battle of Arracourt, a psychological watershed. The stage was set for a dramatic demonstration of the new ammunition's impact. In September 1944, Lieutenant General George S. Patton's Third Army was racing eastward, its logistics stretched to the breaking point. The 4th Armored Division, one of Patton's most effective spearheads, had seized a bridgehead over the Moselle River near the town of Arracourt. The German High Command, recognizing the threat of Patton reaching the German border, ordered General Hasso von Manteuffel's 5th Panzer Army to counterattack and destroy the American bridgehead. The force assembled for this task included the newly formed 111th and 113th Panzer Brigades, equipped with a high proportion of brand-new Panther tanks. On paper, the Germans held a crushing advantage. The 2 brigades fielded approximately 150 tanks, primarily Panthers, against Combat Command A, CCA, of the 4th Armored Division, which mustered roughly 50 Shermans. German planners, confident in the Panthers' technical supremacy, expected a decisive victory. The Battle of Arracourt, fought from September 18-29, 1944, would prove them catastrophically wrong, becoming the largest tank battle for the U.S. Army until the Battle of the Bulge. The morning of September 19th dawned with a thick, impenetrable fog shrouding the rolling landscape around Arracourt. This weather, which hampered German reconnaissance, became a great equalizer. The inexperienced German crews, advancing blindly in column formations, blundered into well-prepared American defensive positions. It was in this claustrophobic visibility that the HVAP round would first prove its worth on a large scale. Units like Captain Kenneth R. Lameson's C Company, 37th Tank Battalion, held key approaches. Their Shermans, a mix of 75mm and 76mm models, had been issued a handful of the precious HVAP rounds. The engagement was sudden and brutal. A Panther would materialize from the mist at a range of less than 100 meters. In the past, this would have been a moment of panic for the Sherman crew. Now, a gunner, peering through his periscope, could lay his reticle on the Panther's distinct gun mantlet and fire. The HVAP round, traveling at over 1,000 meters per second, would cover the short distance in an instant. Witnesses described the tungsten core punching through the curved steel of the mantlet with a bright flash, often followed seconds later by a catastrophic secondary explosion as the round detonated the ammunition stored within the Panthers' turret. In quick succession, multiple Panthers were destroyed in these close-range, fog-shrouded ambushes. As the fog lifted, the battle evolved, but the American advantage only grew. The initial shock of the HVAP attacks had disrupted the German advance. Now, American combined arms doctrine came into full play. Forward artillery observers called down devastating barrages on German formations. P-47 Thunderbolt fighter bombers of the 405th Fighter Group dove through the clouds to strafe and rocket exposed armor. Fast-moving M18 Hellcat tank destroyers, also equipped with 70-6 Mittimet guns and HVAP, used their speed to flank and engage the bewildered German units. The Germans, for all their technical prowess, had advanced without adequate infantry, artillery, or air support. Their qualitative edge in individual tank design was systematically dismantled by a superior American system of warfare. The psychological impact was immediate and profound. For the American tankers, the sight of a brewing Panther was no longer a signal for retreat, but a call to action. They had seen the new ammunition work. They knew they now had a chance. For the German crews, the myth of their Panther's invulnerability was shattered in a single morning. Survivors returned to their lines with confused reports of Shermans firing mysterious hypervelocity rounds that could pierce their frontal armor. The tactical confidence that came from believing they were immune to frontal attack was gone, replaced by a new and unsettling caution, strategic implications, and the scarcity problem. The American victory at Arracourt was resounding. By the time the battle concluded, American forces had destroyed or disabled approximately 86 German tanks and assault guns for the loss of only 25 Shermans and 7 tank destroyers. This lopsided victory, achieved against a technically superior foe, sent shockwaves through the German command structure. German after-action reports struggled to explain the defeat, eventually identifying the American use of tungsten-cored ammunition as a key factor. This discovery had dire strategic implications for Germany. It demonstrated that American industrial might could not only outproduce Germany in terms of tanks, but could also rapidly field technological countermeasures that negated Germany's carefully engineered qualitative advantages. The German military had, in fact, developed its own version of tungsten-cored ammunition, the Panzer 40. However, Germany's critical shortage of tungsten meant these rounds were produced in minuscule quantities, often only for testing or issued in handfuls to a few elite units. The realization that the United States could produce and distribute such ammunition to frontline tank units on a meaningful scale was a demoralizing testament to the vast gulf in industrial capacity and resource access between the two nations. Despite its success, the HVAP round remained a critically scarce resource for the remainder of the war. Production, though ramping up steadily, could never meet demand. From an initial output of 1,000 rounds in August 1944, production peaked at around 7,000 rounds per month by January 1945. By the time of the Battle of the Bulge in December 1944, the average 76mm Sherman in Europe might still only have 5 HVAP rounds in its entire ammunition loadout. This scarcity forced difficult command decisions. Tank destroyer units, whose sole mission was anti-tank combat, were often prioritized for HVAP allocation, while regular Sherman tank battalions, which bore the brunt of the daily fighting, frequently had to make do with fewer rounds or none at all. This shortage meant that the tactical revolution sparked at Arracourt could not be fully realized. Sherman crews could not rely on HVAP as their primary ammunition. It was a special tool for special circumstances. They still had to employ superior tactics, maneuver for flank shots, and rely heavily on the combined arms support of artillery, infantry, and air power. The HVAP round did not make the Sherman a better tank than the Panther. It simply gave well-trained and well-supported American crews a crucial fighting chance in a direct confrontation, altering the psychological balance of power on the battlefield, technical realities, and combat limitations. For all its revolutionary potential, the M93 HVAP round was not a magical solution, and its technical limitations were well understood by the crews who used it. The very properties that made the tungsten carbide core so effective also presented significant drawbacks. Tungsten carbide is an extremely hard but also brittle material. If it struck armor at an unfavorable angle or at velocities below a certain threshold, typically at very long ranges where the round had slowed down, the core had a tendency to shatter upon impact rather than penetrating. This phenomenon was known as core breakout and could render a perfectly aimed shot completely ineffective. The effective range against a Panther's frontal armor was therefore not infinite. While the mantelet could be penetrated at up to 1,000 meters, the heavily sloped glacis plate remained a nearly impossible target except at very close ranges and perfect angles. Crews quickly learned through trial and error, sometimes with fatal consequences, that firing their precious HVAP at a Panther's front hull at 1,500 meters was a waste of a priceless asset. The ammunition demanded skilled employment. It required gunners to not only hit a specific, smaller target on the enemy tank, the mantlet or turret face, but also to have a good understanding of the range and angle to ensure the core would not shatter. Documented combat experiences from late 1944 highlight these limitations. In one engagement on November 20, 1944, a Sherman crew fired multiple HVAP rounds at the side armor of a Panther from approximately 800 yards. To the crew's frustration, the rounds ricocheted or failed to penetrate, likely due to the extreme angle of the shot or hitting areas of spaced or composite armor. Such incidents served as a stark reminder that technology was no substitute for marksmanship, tactical positioning, and a cool head under fire. The HVAP round was a powerful equalizer, but it did not absolve American tankers of the need for courage, skill, and sound judgment. It shifted the odds in their favor, but it did not guarantee victory. The enduring legacy of a revolutionary projectile. The impact of the HVAP round extended far beyond the final battles of World War II in Europe. Its development and combat deployment marked a pivotal moment in armored warfare doctrine, cementing the principle that the effectiveness of a tank is determined as much by its ammunition as by the gun that fires it, or the armor that protects it. The lessons learned in the fields of Normandy and Lorraine directly influenced post-war tank design and military thinking. The psychological transformation of the American armored force from mid-1944 to 1945 was profound. The apprehensive crews who landed on D-Day, fearful of the mythical German big cats, evolved into the confident veterans of the drive into Germany. This change was born of hard-won experience, improved training, and the knowledge that they possessed tools like the HVAP that could, when used correctly, defeat any enemy they faced. This legacy was carried forward by men like Lieutenant Colonel Creighton Abrams, who commanded the 37th Tank Battalion at Arracourt with such distinction that he would later have the U.S. Army's premier main battle tank, the M1 Abrams, named in his honor. The M1, with its powerful 120mm smoothbore gun and advanced ammunition including depleted uranium penetrators, is the spiritual and technological descendant of the 76mm Sherman and its tungsten-cored HVAP round. The core technological concept pioneered by the HVAP, using a dense, high-hardness sub-caliber penetrator to defeat armor, remains the foundational principle of modern kinetic energy anti-tank ammunition. Today's armor-piercing fin-stabilized discarding sabot, APFSDS rounds, are the direct heirs to the M93, using long, slender darts of depleted uranium or tungsten alloy to achieve phenomenal penetration. The battle at Arracourt on September 19, 1944, therefore, was more than just a tactical victory. It was a demonstration that industrial innovation, applied to solve an urgent battlefield problem, could overcome a significant technical disadvantage. This lesson, written in steel and tungsten on the battlefields of France, continues to resonate in the halls of military planning and arms development to this day.